Hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Sugihara, Executive Director of CAPE, the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, and I'm excited to welcome you all to this special fireside chat with Belle Director Hosoda, Mamoru, and DIASPORA Founder Dino-Ray Ramos. Belle is in theaters now, and it is getting a ton of buzz on the award circuit, so please watch it if you haven't already. And a special thank you to Consul General Muto Akira and Vice Consul Matobo Hiroko of the Consulate General of Japan in Los Angeles, Joshua Mori, Studio Chizu, and of course the team at GKIDS for making today's event possible. Without further ado, Dino and Hosoda-san, dozo. Please take it away.
どうもこんにちは。
Hello, everyone, and
Hello.
everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. First off, I just want to say congratulations to Hosoda-san for this movie. We'll talk about it a lot. It really touched me in this way that I have, well, let's just talk about it in a little bit. But I just want to start off by asking you, what was the inspiration behind Belle, and was there a personal connection there, or like where did this journey with Belle start?
はじめに本当ベルおめでとうございますと、すごい個人的にも感動した映画だったんですけど、ちょっとそこの原点に行って、今回の映画の、インスピレーションといいますか、なんでこの映画を作りたかったのか、そういう個人的な理由とかあったんでしょうか。
これね、今その映像にも流れましたけども、このスズっていう田舎に住むね、引っ込み思案の女の子とベルっていう歌ってる女の子、同一人物なんですよね。現実の世界とネットの世界と。で、なんかうちのね、6歳になる娘もね、うちの中ですごいにぎやかでプリンセスみたいなのに、幼稚園に行くと引っ込み思案っていう、もうね、そういうなんか2つの面ってみんな人間持ってると思う。で、そういうことがやっぱりすごくネットの世界の中で非常に今大事なことなんじゃないかな。もう一人の自分と向き合うってことが大事だなと思って、それでこのベルっていう作品を作ったんですよ。
So as you saw in the footage, the medley, the girl that we saw, Suzu, and Belle are actually the same person. I don't think that's a spoiler, but one in the real life and one in the world of the internet. And interestingly, my daughter, she's 6 years old right now, and at home she acts like the princess of the house, but as soon as she goes to kindergarten, she's the shyest kid in class. So there's this interesting duality that I think we all have in our real present life and what we project in the internet. And if even a 6-year-old can have these two sides, I think it's important that we understand and come face to face with these different sides of ourselves.
And I honestly went into the movie kind of totally blind. I think I read a brief summary of it, and then when I watched it, I was like, I was obviously impressed, but also, interested in this connection with this classic story of Beauty and the Beast. And you use this story, this classic fairy tale in this way, a very well-known story. It's a very well-known story. But how did you use this very well-known story to inform Belle, but also not lean too heavily on it so Belle can be its own movie?
私は何も知らずにこの映画を見て本当にすごいなって思ったんですが、その美女と野獣とのつながりですかね。ここはどういうふうに監督的にバランスを取ったというか、ベルはベルでやっぱその映画が成り立つ必要はあると思いますし、ただ美女と野獣もインスピレーションになっているその古典のそれを両方どう両立されたのかと。
そう、このねタイトルがベルっていうぐらいなんで、これは美女と野獣のベルですよね。すごいね、僕は昔から美女と野獣が好きで、特に野獣が好きなんですよね。その暴力的な外見と優しい心っていう二面性がある。で、なんか現代に美女と野獣っていうのを表現するとしたらインターネットの中が すごいいいんじゃないかってことを思いついたんですね。インターネットもさっきベルとスズの話でしたように、こう二重性があるでしょ。その現実の自分とインターネットに接続している自分っていうのは同じようで違うっていう、それがこう美女と野獣ってものとすごくうまく響き合うと思ったんですね。まあやっぱりその古典を表現するっていうのはやっぱりこう現代っていうのは今どういう時代なのかっていうのを古典昔と照らし合わせて今ってことは考えることができるんで、非常にこう有効だなと思ってるんですよ。
As the title of the movie implies, Belle, it is a clear reference to the Beauty and the Beast classical fairy tale, of course. And I've personally been a huge fan of the Beauty and the Beast story for a very long time, especially the Beast. I'm attracted to this, again, duality that he has, a very violent looking exterior, but a very kind heart on the inside. So when I thought about how we take this classical literature, this classical fairy tale, and bring it into the present day, I also saw a similar comparison with the real life versions of ourselves and the projections that we have on the internet. They're the same person, yet quite different depending on how people maintain that. And there is an interesting resonance that I felt. And also, the classical literature genre as a whole kind of offers us something really interesting when you place it into the context to see what has changed over the years and what ideologies remain the same.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned, I mean, there's very much a heavy influence, and social media has a great part in this, you know, in addition to pulling from Beauty and the Beast and using that as an inspiration. There, you know, I felt very much a parallel to Ready Player One, that movie, or even like Avatar, these movies where we have these versions of ourselves in this kind of digital or made up virtual world. How do you think Belle, you mentioned this already, but how do you think Belle is a commentary on our relationship with technology and with social media, especially, you know, in the 21st century?
もちろんすごいソーシャルメディアであったり、そういった影響もこの映画では感じるんですが、レディープレイヤー1であったり、アバターみたいな映画で、その本人がいて、何か別の本人のいわゆるプロジェクションみたいなものがあると思うんですけど、そこに対する監督のコメンタリーといいますか、やっぱりそのテクノロジーとの距離感、人間としてどう思われているのか。
そうですね。これね、僕ね、もう実はね、こうインターネットを舞台にした映画っていうのはもう20年前、1900じゃないや、2000年から作ってるんですね。21年前か。インターネットの歴史が26、7年の中で、21年間こうインターネットの舞台に映画を作ってるっていうのは僕ぐらいだと思うんですけども、やっぱりね、こうすごくもうどんどんやっぱりそれまではやっぱりインターネットってただの道具だったのが今やもう世界になってるよね。さっき言ったインターネットの自分と現実の自分っていうのはもう自分が2人いるようなもんだっていう気がします。世界が2つあるんだから、そういう中でこう今僕らは生きてるんだなっていう、若い子はこれから生きていくんだなっていう気がします。でなんかそれ前のね、やっぱりこうレディープレイヤー1とかなんかそういうなんか文明批評的にね、割とディストピアっぽく描く、マトリックスもそうだよね、いうような風に今までの映画ってそういう割とインターネットを悪くっていうかな、ネガティブに描いてきたと思うんだけど、これからもうやっぱりこうもう一個の世界がねインターネットの中にあるっていうのはもう、止められないことだと思うんで、よりこうどうやったら肯定的に僕らそういう世界の中で生きていくかっていうのをなんか若い子を応援するような感じで作りたいと思ったんですよ。
The movie itself, of course, has a very strong influence by this concept or idea of the internet, and of looking back at my career over the last 20 years, I've been making movies that in some way, shape, or form deal with this concept of the internet since 2000. I want to say, and given the internet's history since it's been more widely adopted is only 26, 7 some odd years, I think that I'm perhaps one of the only directors who've been really chasing this concept of the internet over time and kind of watching it evolve. And I really felt in the beginning the internet was this tool of convenience, but more and more as time has passed, it has evolved into almost another world in and of itself, another reality. And I think that we as people have to live in both realities, especially the younger generations. They almost are born into coexisting and in finding themselves in one reality and the other. And oftentimes, the movies that you just called out, Ready Player One, or even The Matrix, for example, they have a tendency to depict the internet or technology in a very dystopian kind of future, very negative lens. Whereas I feel that this evolution, this trend isn't something that is slowing down, or it's not something we can stop. So why show it in such a negative light? Or we should be figuring out how to approach it with care and help guide people how to live in both of these realities that we've created.
I really agree with that, because now that you just mentioned it, the future, especially with the internet, is always shown as dystopian, or like very sad. I mean, and there was something so joyful about, you know, what we see in this virtual world in Belle, but at the same time we see that the characters in real life are sad, and we see this with our main character, Suzu. And I watched this, and I remember I spent probably the last 10 to 15 minutes crying in this movie, just because it deals with grief. It deals with abusive relationships. And overall, I think there's this theme of loneliness in Belle, in the movie. Can I ask, when did you start writing the movie? Was it? I'm guessing it's before the pandemic.
そうですね、おっしゃる通り、すごいやっぱディストピアな未来に描くことは多いんですけど、本当ベルではもう少しすごい明るい未来を感じさせると同時に、とはいえ現実世界の方でもちょっと悲しい部分も描いていたので、本当に最後の10分15分くらいもう映画館で泣いてました、私。すごいその悲しみであったり、そういう DV があるような関係性であったり、本当にその寂しさっていうもの、孤独さっていうのは描かれた感じがします。で、今回ちょっと制作につながる質問なんですけど、脚本とかそのプロット、本当にこの映画の最初のライティングの部分、どの部分から監督は始めたんですか？いつ頃始めたんでしょうかね？
これね、そうなんですよね。さっきインターネットの世界はね、ポジティブに描いてるけど、現実世界の方は、お母さん死んだりとか結構ネガティブじゃないかっていう。でもね、でもそれを、別にね、現実は辛くてインターネットは素晴らしいとか、っていうことを言いたいんじゃないんだよ。両方とも、なんていうかな、僕らが生きていく現実だっていう風なつもりで、描いたんだけども、これ、作ってる時はね、脚本はね、2019年ぐらいに作って、いよいよそれからストーリーボードを書いていこうって時に世界中がパンデミックになったんだよね。でやっぱりずっとね、僕一人でストーリーボードを書いてたんだけど、ずっと外出できないでパンデミックの中で書いてたから、何かそういうね、抑圧から解放されたい、なんか自由になりたい、今は辛いけどもなんか外に飛び出したいっていう気持ちがなんかこの映画の中にすごく入った気がしますね。それがこの映画の中のこの鈴っていうのが結構やっぱりその抑圧の中にいるんだけども、そこからベルっていう人になって自由になるっていう、そういうそして歌を歌う、歌を歌うってことも単にその有名になるとかサクセスするってことじゃなくて、自由を得るってことなんだと思うんだ。でそういうことがやっぱりこのパンデミックの中で作ることによって、そういう自由を求める気持ちっていうのが見る人と共有できるような内容になったんじゃないかな。
You brought something up that was interesting, that the the reality, the present, the real life, not the internet, was depicted in kind of a negative, a negative light. But I, by no means, am trying to say that the internet is all rainbows and butterflies and real life is depressing. I think there's two realities, and there's constantly going to be two realities in the future. And how do we balance both of those and see both sides of both realities? But to answer your question, I started writing the screenplay in about 2019. And then we transitioned into the storyboarding process the following year, which is when the pandemic hit and everything was locked down. So of course we couldn't go outdoors, and I actually I storyboard the movie myself. So I was cooped up in a room storyboarding this whole movie. And I think that there is certainly a sense of in the storyboards, this idea of liberation or freeing yourself from suppression of some kind. And I was probably feeling that myself because of the circumstance and conditions. So I think that trickled into the movie itself. So Suzu herself is suppressed in many ways in her current reality, the real world as we call it. And through becoming Belle and singing, it's more for her than just becoming successful or becoming an internet star. It is, to me, about attaining freedom. It is about liberation. So that's why song is so important. I think that during this pandemic, I felt it in the storyboarding process, and I think a lot of us are feeling that. So this idea of liberation is very present in the movie.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We're in the middle of Sundance right now, and I've been watching a lot of movies for like this past weekend. And it's amazing and about how there's a lot of movies. I don't know if everyone got together and thought it would be a good idea, but there's a lot of movies about grief right now and how to deal with it. And I think that's why I personally connected with Belle. I recently lost someone, and you want to disappear and you want to kind of shut the world out and just like live in your own world. And then kind of Belle made it okay to do that. When you're watching it, you kind of like, oh, it's okay to grieve, but it's like, oh, when does grieving become not grieving anymore and more of like kind of self-destruction? And I'm just so happy that a film like this exists. I mean, there's like not a similar movie. There's a movie by Koganada that recently came out called After Yang, and they deal with grief. And then we watch things like Black Mirror, and you were mentioning before about how this like Black Mirror depicts the future as like horrible, and there's a lot of things about grief in Black Mirror. So I do like this, how it comes at a time when we're all grieving one way or another, whether it be a death or this pandemic. But now that this movie's out and we are still we're still in a pandemic. Do you think this movie is different to you now than when you first started?
すごい今、サンダンスも映画祭が開かれてるんですけど、様々な映画を私見ていて、で、結構その悲しみっていうテーマを扱っている映画で、その悲しみをどう攻略するかであったり、そういう映画が結構、最近いっぱいあるように感じるんですね。で、私も、ちょっとここ最近ちょっと近しい人を失ってしまったんですね。で、やっぱそうなってしまうと、もうどうしても世界から閉ざして、もうこうもう孤独にしてくれみたいな感じで思っちゃうんですね。で、このベルを見ることによって、ちょっとそれをやってもいいんだっていう、励みにも感じたんですね。で、それがやっぱ過ぎてしまうと、自己崩壊にもつながるかもしれないので、そこら辺のバランスだと思うんですけど、例えば他の映画で言うと、ココナタの、アフターヤングっていう映画であったり、ブラックミラーっていうテレビシリーズもあるんですけど、かなりおっしゃる通り、未来があんまり明るくないような描き方はするんですね。で、そこで質問なんですけど、このパンデミック中にその映画を作る前のその映画に対する気持ちと、映画がこうやって公開されてみんなのリアクションが見れる今で、映画に対する気持ちは変わったんでしょうかね、今回のベルの。
でもね、それはそうだね。まずやっぱりそうだね。 最初にこの映画の中でどういうふうに主人公が悲しみをねっていうものを克服したか、その道筋についてちょっとだけ言うと、すずっていうのはそのお母さんがね、見ず知らずの子供を助けて死んじゃうっていう体験をして、でそれがどうして私よりも見ず知らずの子供を選んだんだろうっていうことが割り切れないでいたんですね。だけどもこの映画の後半の方でこのすずっていうのはこの助けなきゃいけない会ったこともない子供を助けることによって自分のお母さんがその時何を思ってどういうふうにしようとしたかっていうのが分かる。ストーリーをこの映画のストーリーを経て、お母さんのことを理解してそれによってすずっていうのはその過去を克服するっていうか、悲しみを克服するっていうプロセスになってるんだと思います。でおっしゃるようにね、やっぱりそのパンデミックになってやっぱりすごいやっぱりこの世の中で非常にやっぱネガティブな空気が広がってますよね。未来はどうなるんだ、非常に暗いんじゃないかっていうような気持ちがあるっていうでね、それは映画作家いろんな人がいると思う。その悲しみに寄り添うとかなんていうのかネガティブになるような気持ちに寄り添うっていうのも一つの形だし、僕なんかは逆にだからこそなんか楽しい映画を作りたいなと思ったりとか、なんかもっとなんか励ますような映画を作ったりすべきじゃないかなって僕なんかは思う。なぜかっていうとね、やっぱりそれは結構ねアニメーションなんで子供に向けて作ってるとか若い人に向けて作ってるってことが多いんで、若い人にねなんか世の中もうダメだって言ってももうしょうがないと思うんだよね。だからやっぱりもっと僕ら大人は絶望してもいいんだけど若い人は絶望してほしくないなという気持ちでなんかもっと楽しい映画を作ろうって思ってるんですけど。
はい。Let's see. No, I think certainly during this pandemic, there is this so almost negative aura that's omnipresent. And first, kind of explain in this movie how our protagonist overcomes grief. Suzu, her mother dies trying to save an anonymous kid, basically. And I think she was raised and growing up always asking herself the question, why did my mother place another child's life value over my own? But towards the end, Suzu, in a similar fashion, saves a child she doesn't even know. And I think there's a certain moment where she begins to understand why her mother does what she does. And she realizes this through her journey and through the movie. And that was her means of overcoming this grief. So translating that into the pandemic, I think a lot of people have this negative aura, this kind of dark future, and perhaps some movie directors, some content creators feel bringing ourselves closer or expressing that grief is one way of understanding it or coming to terms with it. But me, on the other hand, I feel the movie should in some kind of way cheer you on or acknowledge it, but paint a different, brighter future in some ways. And perhaps that is especially true because the animation medium is a medium that I think a lot of younger audiences are going to be watching in some way, shape, or form. So if the message or the commentary is, hey, the world is doomed, it's doom and gloom, it's dark future, et cetera, if you're telling that to kids, that's going to be extra depressing because they have their whole future ahead of them. If adults are one thing, but I wouldn't want to put that message upon the kids.
Oh, well, you mentioned, the kids, and, you mentioned this was kind of your daughter had, influence on the movie. Has your daughter seen the film? And like, what I'm guessing she has. And what does she think? What has she taken away from it? Is she like less shy out in public now? How has your daughter received the film?
今回もすごいやっぱ若い世代に向けてであったり、冒頭の方でちょっと娘を意識して書いたとかっていうふうにおっしゃってたんですけど、娘さんは見てるとは思うんですけど、この映画を見て娘さんは何か変化するものがあったのか、どういうところが好きでどういうところが すごい共感できたのか。で、これを見ることによって、幼稚園行ってもなんか友達持ってきたりしたんでしょうか。
まあ最初はね、娘6歳、まあ当時5歳なんで、さすがにちょっとこの内容を理解するのは難しいかなと思うわけ。なんたって、高校生のね、女の子が主人公だからね、少なくとも高校生以上じゃないと理解できないんじゃないかと思うんだけど、でもまあ、母親とね、まあお兄ちゃんと一緒に3人で見て、でもね、まあ、見終わってどうだったって聞いたら、すごい楽しかったって言ってくれたよ。なんか、まあ、彼女は彼女なりに理解したんだろうね。でもってベルがすごく素敵だったって言ってたの。で、その映画館を出た後に、なんていうの、UFO キャッチャーでベルの人形が置いてあったんだけど、それを一生懸命欲しがって、なんとか頑張って撮って、すごい大事にしてるっていう。なんかやっぱりその女の子っていうのかな。まあ人間にとってなんかそういう、なんか憧れの人っていう風な形でベルが映ったっていうのはすごい、作った方としても嬉しかったな。まあ本当はね、そのベルをどっから発想したかっていうと、あなたから発想したんだよ。自分の娘から発想したのに、その娘がね、そのベルを気に入ってくれたっていうのは本当になんか良かったよね。
Right. Well, at the time the movie came out in Japan, my daughter was only 5 years old. So I think that the themes in the movie might be a little bit difficult for her, shall we say? And the protagonist is a high school girl. So perhaps you need to, I think once you're in high school or older, you'll start to understand the themes a little bit better. But my daughter did go see the movie with my wife and her older brother. So the three of them went, and she said it was a very fun movie. And perhaps she had her own interpretation or her own way of coming to terms or understanding the movie itself. But what she did say was that the character Belle was really, really lovely. And on the way out of the movie theater, there was a crane game where there's a little Belle figurine or toy inside of it. So she tried really hard to catch it, and she still has that toy to this day. But it's interesting that Belle has kind of become this source of admiration, and I hope that she can become that for not just young girls but also people at large. But going one step further, it's interesting because, how do I tell her that she was the inspiration for the character that's now inspiring her? It's an interesting cycle.
Oh, cool. And also I just want to let the audience know that if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. I'm going to address those audience questions for the Q&A in a little bit. But before we get to that, I just want to ask one more question. In terms of your career, how does Belle speak to where you currently are at in your career and your journey as a storyteller and a filmmaker?
まあ、ちょっともう一問だけ私の方からお聞きいただいて、そこからちょっと Q&A に入りたいなと思ってます。で、まあ、ちょっと細田監督のキャリアですけど、このベルがシアトリカルで出て、一ストーリーテラー、一クリエイターとして、このキャリアのどの位置に今監督は立っていると思うんでしょうかね。
どういう意味なんだろう。キャリアのどの位置に立ってる
When you say like where in his career, like after Belle, do you mean does he have more stories to tell, or what exactly is the
okay. Where he is at, not like physically obviously, but like as a storyteller, like how does this film mark his career, like where he is at in his career as a storyteller? Like what, how does he think how are you thinking you're going to evolve? What have you taken away from this film that you're going to bring into other films?
そうですね、このベルっていう映画が監督のキャリアにとって何を意味するのかっていう点と、このベルを経て は何を監督が得られて、それを今後の
そうかそうか。
作品とかに、活かせるんでしょうかという、まあそういう本当キャリアとこのベルっていう映画を、
そうね。
比べたときに、
まあ、
はい、
僕がこのベルの映画、僕の映画の中で6本目の映画なんだけども、まあ、おそらく、アメリカではね、僕のこの前の作品、未来っていう作品から知ってる人が多いかもしれない。なぜなら、その未来っていうのは、アカデミー賞のアニメーション部門にノミネートされたので、で、その流れでそこからこのベルっていう作品が、あると思います。で、このベルっていうのはやっぱりその非常にこうグローバルな形で作っていこう、パンデミックなせいもあって、逆にそのいろんな日本以外のいろんな人たちと一緒にこう作っていこうみたいな風になって、例えば、まあ、ディズニーの、まあ、レジェンドキャラクターデザイナージン・キムさんとか、アイルランドのカートゥーンサルーンのみんなとか、まあ、そういういろんな世界中の人たちと協力しないながら作りました。それってなんでできるかっていうと、やっぱりその未来が評価されたからで、それはそのアメリカのなんか映画の評価軸の中で評価してもらえたんで、さらにこう作品を広げることができた。で、こうやってこのベルもアメリカ、まあ、先週公開することができたっていうのですごい嬉しい。だからこれからもっとやっぱりこうすごくそういうこう、まあ、今までにないような非常にこうグローバルなまあ、もっと挑戦的な面白い映画を世界中のたくさんの人と協力して作っていきたいなって思うんですよね。こういうことかな。
多分そうです。はい、一応。
多分。
So Belle actually marks my sixth movie in my filmography. And in the US, I feel that perhaps a lot of people or my fans discovered me through Mirai, partially because it was nominated for an Oscar Best Animated Feature. But Mirai really, in many ways, helped set the stage for me to work on Belle because, well, obviously, the world was in a very different situation during the pandemic. But at the same time, it opened up the possibility to working with a lot of global collaborators. And in some ways, Belle is a very global movie. The narrative kind of pulls in many societies, many different cultures from around the world, where Mirai was a much, you could say smaller, but it was much more localized and contained in some ways. So in that respect, it also opened the doors for us to collaborate with amazing talent from around the world. Jin Kim from Disney, who helped with the character design, folks at Cartoon Saloon in Ireland who worked on a scene. So we were able to work together in part because of what Mirai had done for me in my career, but also because of the circumstances that the world was in at the time. So Mirai's reception helped me expand the possibilities. And now that Belle had just opened last week in the US, I think that Belle will in some ways expand the possibilities even more in the future. So I hope that it will allow me to continue to challenge and push the status quo of collaborating with worldwide talent and telling different narratives.
Nice.
I think that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. I just like asking that to see like where their heads at. Okay, I want to take some questions from the audience. I'm looking at some of these questions, and you kind of already answered a lot of them, but let me ask this one. What is the process of casting the voice for each character? What did you see in each artist that had the voice or charisma you felt was related to the character? From Sally Chung. Thank you, Sally.
サリー・チューンからの質問ですね。今回の、特にボイスのキャスティングですね。なんか何を監督は求めていて、各そのタレントさんの中に何を見つけて、あ、これだって決まるんでしょうかね。
これはね、
カリスマなのか、なんか共感性なのか。はい。
これね、やっぱりこう重要なことはね、このスズとベルが同じ人に演じてほしくて、なおかつベルっていうのが歌がうまいので、歌も一緒に歌う人であってほしかったんですね。で、よくこう、歌と芝居は別に分けるっていうね、別人で分けて同一人物でやるっていう映画もあるんだけど、そうはしたくなくて、全部一人の人にやってほしかった。 だけどね、それをね、見つけるのが難しいんですよね。単になんかうまいってだけじゃなくて、やっぱりその表現力がある、真実味があるっていう、あの、人がいいんですよ。なんかこう、例えばカラオケで歌がうまい人と、本当に人をこう、感動させるような歌を歌う人って違うでしょ。で、やっぱりそういう意味では、やっぱりすごくそういう人を見つけ出すのが大変でした。日本では中村佳穂っていう人がいて、で、フランスではルワンヌっていう人がやってくれて、それで、アメリカではカイリーっていう女の子がやってくれた。さっきの映像も見たと思うんだけど、非常にこう、表現力のある、彼女19歳なんだけど、何千人も実はオーディションしてて、そんな中で、見つけたすごくこの作品、このベルにぴったりな人だと思います。そんな風にして選びました。
With regards to the process of casting and choosing vocal talent, for me it was really important because Suzu and Belle were the same person, and Belle as a character naturally needs to be able to sing. Oftentimes in the casting process, they will split these roles. One person does the acting, the performance, one person does the singing, or at least in Japan that is the case. But I really wanted the same person to embody all of those components and really bring it out in the character. So needless to say, the talent pool that can check all those boxes was quite limited. But in addition to that, I was also looking for someone who wasn't simply good with singing, but really had this wide range of expression and expressiveness. And I think that really helps bring us closer to some truth that we all feel behind that. And I think we can agree that there are some people who are really good when you go to karaoke bar and they can really sing. But then for me, there are people who can really sing and they really touch you on a most fundamental level. It's hard to describe. And in Japan, that talent happened to be Kaho Nakamura. In the French version, there was a person named Luan, and in the English version, there was a 19-year-old named Kylie, and we actually auditioned over 1,000 people to finally settle on her for the English vocal talent. But that, for me, was the process of casting Suzu.
We're getting one question a lot, and I think it's a popular question. You probably get asked this a lot, but I think since you're in the realm of animation, I think it hits a little bit different. But we're getting asked, one person asked, I wish to be an anime director, an artist, and your films have inspired me. What advice can you give? That is from Neo Anderson. I don't know if that's his real name. That sounds like the Matrix, like, Mr. Anderson and me. But if it is, that's cool. But I think a lot of people are wondering, what career advice can you give to budding filmmakers?
そうですね、結構この質問がコメント欄に上がってきているので、ちょっと皆さんを代表してネオ・アンダーソン、ちょっとネオ・アンダーソンさんはなんかマトリックスっぽい味があるんですけど、やっぱアニメの業界でそういうディレクターであったり、そのアーティストであったり、アニメーターになりたいっていう方々に対するメッセージというか、キャリアアドバイスって何かありますかね？
そうだね。これは結構よく聞かれるし、やっぱり憧れだよね。でもね、僕ね、学生の時はね、とてもこう映画監督になれるなんて思ってなかったけどね、なんでかっていうとね、すごいやっぱり喋るのが苦手でね、すごいなんか人と喋るよりはなんか一人で絵を描いてる方が性に合ってたんだよね。だから大学もその油絵科、美術大学の油絵科に、行くぐらいだから、もう一人で絵を描いて、食べていこうと思ってたわけ。ところがね、そんな人間がね、何の間違いかね、映画監督になっちゃったんだよね。で、すごい人見知りなのにね、こうやって映画監督になっていろんな人と話さなきゃいけなくなるっていうからね、人生わかんないよ、不思議だよ。つまりなんかね、つまりね、その職業がね、人間を変えちゃったわけ。全然俺見て、ね、皆さん、人見知りだと思わないかもしれないけども、超人見知りなの、本当は。なのにね、でもやっぱり映画監督って職業だから頑張って、 もっとこう社交的にしなきゃみたいな風にしてるとだんだんこうそうなってくるっていう。だからね、まあそういう部分ではね、なんか自分はね、映画を作りたいけど映画監督向いてないかなっていう人はいるかもしれないけどね、もうなっちゃえばもうやるしかないから、もう本当に。もうね、自分のね、持ってる性格捨ててもう頑張ってやるしかないから、もう頑張ってください。
This is certainly a question that comes up quite often. And to kind of, I think what I could do is give you a little bit of an anecdote of my own career path, if you will. But when I was a student, I never thought I was going to ever become a movie director. And part of that was because I was never really good at talking. I was definitely on the shyer end of the spectrum, and I preferred drawing alone and in my room. And that's why for college, I studied oil painting. And, you know, through some twist of fate, I don't know how it happened, I was forced into this job where I'm talking to people constantly and trying to create these movies. So what I would say is it, for me, was a result of circumstance and the environment in which I found myself. And the closer and closer I got to directing, the more and more it almost pushed me in that direction. And then I had to almost change myself to meet the part. So if you just throw yourself into an environment, you may begin to change or see changes in yourself if that's what you really want. That, oh, now I have to actually talk to people and be a little bit better and more sociable. And I changed as a result of becoming closer and closer to that movie director role. So, and just keep pushing and keep trying to get closer, and then something could happen to get you there.
I think we have time for a couple more questions, I'm guessing, but I'll just ask this one because this is actually a very interesting question here. As you have depicted the internet in your films over the past 20 years, what new techniques or technology were you able to employ to evolve your portrayal of the virtual world of you?
これ結構面白い質問で、まあ、20年間くらいインターネットを題材にして映画作られたとおっしゃってたんですけど、その20年間の中で、技術面で、例えばこういうテクニック使ったらもうちょっと表現ができるとか、こういう技術とかこういうテクノロジー使えばもうちょっとインターネットっぽい表現に近づけるっていう、まあ、技術と手法の方でのなんか進化ってあったんでしょうかね、監督が感じた。
これはやっぱりね、20年前って、まあ、やがてその VR の世界っていうのはこうなるだろうってこういう、まあ、予測は立ってても、現実には存在してなかったんですよね。まあ、だからまあ、映画で描く価値があったっていうのが、まあ20年前の出来事なんだけど、で、今っていうのは、ゲームも進化したし、VR も進化したので、まあ、要するに現実にもある世界じゃないですか。でも、その上でさらに、その映画で見ることの、まあ、プライオリティっていうか、映画で見た方が価値がある世界っていうのは何だろうっていうところが、やっぱりその映画を作る上でのコツっていうか、ポイントだと思うんですよね。だからそういう部分で非常にこう今って例えばゲームとかが、まあ、どんどんこう複雑になってすごくシェーディングとかが複雑にこう、まあ、リアルタイムで動くようになったんでそういうふうにしていったらいいんじゃないかっていうふうに思うんだけども、多分それ逆なんですよね。やっぱりねもっとねやっぱりそのイマジネーションをこうみんなに持ってもらえるような世界を作るっていうのが大事で、その技術面だけじゃなくて、その、まあ、イマジネーション、例えば今回だったら非常にグラフィカルな世界にするとか、もっとこう、そのグラフィカルな世界の向こうに何かこう、想像力を刺激するような、世界を作るとか、なんかね、そっちが大事なんだよね。その技術にね、依存しすぎると、かえって現実と変わんない VR になっちゃってつまんないってことになっちゃうっていう、そこがポイントだと思います。
For me, looking at the sort of evolution of technology 20 years ago, VR was still in its infancy, if that. And I think we all just had kind of a faint imagination of what the world could be if technology kept on this trajectory. But fast forward to today, and you look at what video games and VR has evolved into, and that world that we tried to imagine 20 years ago is quite real. So it's in what I do, I like to think about how movies fit into this eco space, and how does watching a movie add value to that person or that audience's experience. And the evolution of what games can do, the new shading techniques and what they can render and export in real time has come a long, long way. But is it really appropriate for movies to also head in that direction? Oftentimes people think it is, but I would actually argue that you have to go in the opposite, against that trend, and make worlds that can provoke the imagination in different ways. Because if you fall into the trap, or you lean too much on new technical shading techniques or how to become more photorealistic, you're really just reproducing what you see in real life in your movie. So I would actually say don't get too caught up in the technological and technique side of things, but really depict a world that can really expand the imagination.
Such a good answer. That's such a good way to kind of slow down with technology. We don't need all that. Yeah. This is another good question from I think that's this Liza Ramos, I guess, like Ramos but with an N. How does it feel that people all around the world, not just in Japan, have loved the movie? And I would also, I'm going to add to that, just like, not even just this movie, but all your movies, you know, you've had this global reach. How has that been in the past 20 years?
結構ここ20年の監督の映画が、グローバルにもリーチできると思うんですけど、やっぱそういう環境であったり、そういう観客のリアクションを見て、監督はどう思われてますかね。それは期待してたものなのか、それともやっぱり海外ではこういう反応してるんだって、日本以外でのリアクションといいますか、ベルはじめ。
でも、そうだな。もちろん映画ってのは、なんだろうな、結構賛否あって、それがこう、議論することによって、面白くなるっていうことはあると思うけども、すごく、なんだろうな、俺の印象だと、フランスやアメリカのなんか批評みたいのを読んでると、すごくやっぱり、なんていうか、すごくポジティブに、すごくこの映画を、捉えてくれるっていうのが、すごく、嬉しいなっていうふうに思いますね。やっぱり多分、美女と野獣っていう、ものがベースになってるから、とっつきやすいっていうのもあるかもしれないんだけども、そういうこと含めて非常に全体的に好意的だったのが、すごくほっとしてますね。日本ではね、そんな美女と野獣っていうものがね、なんかいまいちフックになってねえなみたいな感じだったりとか、なんかそこからこう内容を理解していくっていうのがあんまりなんかね、そういう感じでもなかったんだけども、やっぱりその、なんていうの、ヨーロッパっていうかね、18世紀のヨーロッパからずっとある物語っていうのが、やっぱりこうすごく、フックになって、皆さんにすごくこの映画を楽しんでもらえて、それは嬉しいなと思うんですよね。っていうことかな。
そうですね。I think movies in general, there's such a wide range of all kinds of movie categories that really prompts discussion. And seeing my movies in the context of their foreign reception, I would say I've seen some articles in French and in the US and certain critiques, and everything has been quite positive, which is simultaneously flattering and also makes me quite happy. And perhaps that is due in part because the narrative of Beauty and the Beast is something that people can anchor onto or attach themselves to. And that was a relief for me, because in the Japanese theatrical release, the Beauty and the Beast angle didn't affect the movie's outcome as much as you would think in terms of the audience and how the audience saw it and received it. But in a more Western context, perhaps it's a story that dates all the way back to 18th century France. So it might be something that resonates with the European audience. It's been around for a while.
So speaking of the Beast, we have another general question. There's like two questions I want to ask. I hope we have time. there's a few of the viewers who are very interested. There's a lot actually who are interested in the dragon. Without major spoilers, why a dragon to play the beast? Is there any story behind it and his arc or their arc?
今回のビーストですけど、そのビースト役に、ドラゴンっていう、生物というか、ドラゴンを、キャスティングしたっていうか、置いたっていうのはあるんですけど、それなぜドラゴンである必要があったのか、何か意味を秘めているんでしょうかね。
そうだね。それは本当にそういうふうに思うよね。これね、デザイナー、きっかけはデザイナーなんだよね。今回、いろんな人にベルやビーストをデザインしてもらったんだけど、その中のね、ある人がね、だから美女と野獣の野獣だっつってんのにね、このね、なんか凶暴なこのドラゴンを描いてきちゃったわけ。で、野獣って言ったじゃんって言うんだけど、なんかそれがすごい離れがたくて、やっぱりすごい魅力的だったんだよね。で、そのやっぱデザイナーの感性っていうか、解釈がすごい面白いなっていうのがあって、で、やっぱり、なんかちょっとこの人のデザインにしていこうっていう風になったんですよね。なんか僕もね、ずっとそれまではもう、いわゆる、野獣だと思って、ね、いろんなデザイナーと打ち合わせしたのに、もういきなりこの映画に出てくる、ドラゴン、ビーストの、絵を見せられて、ハッとしたわけ。なんかこれが正解じゃないかっていう風に思ってしまうぐらいの説得力があったんですよね。
なるほど。
そうそう。
面白いですね。So the dragon playing the role of the beast was actually a very designer-driven decision, shall we say? And I actually had a few different designers come up with concepts for Belle as well as the beast, and we wanted to see kind of different interpretations or different ways to express that concept. And one of the designers came out with this really belligerent dragon looking creature, and I remember thinking to myself, I said beast, what is this? But at the same time, for some reason I couldn't let go of that design, and I found something quite attractive with it. It was a very interesting interpretation of how to view a beast. So I thought, well, maybe we should dig a little deeper into this design and see where it goes. And something about it just clicked inside of me. So it was a designer-driven and inspired kind of ultimate direction. Because I was thinking myself, it's going to look like a beast, like what you would imagine a stereotypical beast type creature would look like.
もうね、アキラさんっていう人なんだけどね、もう若くてね、何のキャリアもない人なのよ。なのに書いてきた人を見てすごい説得されちゃったっていう。
名前だけもう一度お願いします。
アキヤさんっていう人。
アキヤ。So it was a designer named Akia, and she's a really, really young designer. And I think she came out of nowhere with this interpretation of the beast. And somehow it was just really convincing for me. And I thought we had to go with that design.
Yeah, I mean, the beast design is super aggressive to me, and I think, but it works. It kind of scares you, but also makes you curious about it. I think we'll do one more, I think. Oh, we're going to close it out. Okay, that's the last question we have time for. Unfortunately, sorry, y'all. Y'all were asking some great questions. So I guess we're going to close it out for the night, and we'll bring Michelle back, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Wow, thank you all so much for that. Thank you, Dino and Hosoda-san, for such an engaging conversation. And thank you to our wonderful interpreter, Mikey McNamara. That's incredible. And thank you once again to the team at GKIDS. Belle is currently playing in theaters, so please spread the word about the film. And after listening to this discussion, I definitely want to watch it again. It raised a lot of things that I hadn't noticed or thought about when I saw it the first time. So thank you for that. Also, special thanks to Rianne Moore, who handled all of the behind the scenes logistics and produced this event on the Cape side. And of course, Jess Wu and Jess Ju, who round out our small and mighty Cape team for social media and other support. I would be remiss to mention that CAPE is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are pleased to bring this event to everybody free of charge, and we appreciate your support and donations to keep us going and to be able to continue to provide events like this. And please follow us at CAPE USA to learn about all of our other future events. But one thing before we sign off that I did want to highlight is the deadline is January 26th for the Julia S. Gao Women and Non-Binary Short Film Challenge, which will award 4 filmmakers $15,000 each to produce a live action or animation short film. So please check out our website at www.capeusa.org if you would like to learn more. So thank you all for tuning in tonight. Thank you for this lovely conversation, and please check out Belle in theaters. Good night.
はい、お疲れ様でした。
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you very much.